back with you with Rudy's Common Sense. Today we are going to take a look at the myriad of cases that have been filed, because I know that that in and of itself has created some confusion, and it's led to some people saying there isn't a consistent legal theory, other people saying that facts haven't been proven, or things that have been alleged haven't been established with evidence. And I want to take you through that now, because everything that's happened has happened for a purpose, and everything that's happened has happened in a very, very determined way, and it's leading to a conclusion that is going to be very powerful, and we believe very effective. And these steps are necessary because of the kind of crimes we're dealing with here, and because of the multitude of jurisdictions that they happened in. It isn't like Bush v. Gore that happened in one place in one state. So this voter fraud, as we developed it and investigated, happened in many states. Some very provable, some will never be able to prove. In some, the voter fraud didn't matter because it didn't affect the result. So when you come down to it, it really turns out to be, in essence, I'd say 6 key states, and possibly 8. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia, and Arizona. In those states, there's substantial evidence of different kinds of voter fraud, which, once proven, would constitute a vote way more than the margin of victory for Joe Biden, which is the reason the president, who is aware of all this, and almost all of it is in lawsuits, says that he believes he won the election. Now, where is this evidence? Well, most of it is in the public record, believe it or not. And you say, well, why don't you know it? You don't know it because the press doesn't cover it. You don't know it because we haven't had an opportunity yet to have a hearing. The Democrats carried out this conspiracy to defraud the American people through a crooked election in very carefully selected places. They didn't go to neutral territory. They didn't go to places where there's an equal number of Republicans or Democrats. They went to very, very heavily controlled Democrat cities in swing states, where they control the political machinery, the judicial machinery, to some extent the law enforcement machinery, and are in control of the press, which is enamored of them and has kept them in office in some cases for 50 years or 60 years or some number like that, so that they can expect favorable treatment in the newspapers and even more favorable treatment in the courts. Here's an outline of the evidence so that you can see it's there and where to go find it. And that the statements that this is wild charges without evidence, and this is unfortunately, a piece of propaganda that even some of the mainstream media has picked up on, obviously, and even some of the more conservative reporters have picked up on it. Partially because they're not doing the hard work of reading the complaints. We try to read it to them, but they don't seem to pay attention. When we held a press conference, I deliberately read from several of the affidavits so that they would realize this is not our words, it's theirs. But the propaganda spin is powerful. So let's see if we can cut through that. The first case, or not necessarily the first, but the first I'll mention is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a case that involves, I guess, on the big picture, the election officials in Pennsylvania running an illegal election in defiance of the state legislature. Now, first you should understand, both for the factual recitation and the legal theory, that elections for president are run by state legislature. Now that sounds strange, but that's the way it is. In Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, it reads as follows: each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct. All right? In such manner as the legislature thereof may direct. A number of electors equal the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Constitution. But no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the Constitution may participate, et cetera, et cetera. So in distinction with what we call the Electors Clause, the Election Clause rather, the Electors Clause rests in the discretion of the state legislature. So let's take a look at the Election Clause. The Election Clause says, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time, by law, make or alter such regulations. So these federal regulations, these federal elections, although they're federal in nature, are directed by the state legislature. So let's go back to the Electors Clause because that governs a federal election. The legislature sets the rules. The election commissions have to follow the rules. The election commissions have no discretion. They have no right to change the rules. Can they make small decisions about timing or number of machines in a particular voting place? Or sure. But can they make big decisions like how to count the vote or what security is necessary? No, they have to follow the letter of the law from the state precisely. And that becomes both a violation of state law and a violation of the Constitution, because remember, it says in the Constitution that the legislature shall determine the rules and the conduct of both elections for Congress and particularly for the presidency. So in Pennsylvania, the rule is that when you have an absentee ballot, both sides must be present in order to inspect that ballot. In the case of Pennsylvania, in two places, and largely only in two places, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, 682,770 ballots were entered secretly, without examination, certainly by a Republican, and possibly even by a Democrat. That violates both the law of the state of Pennsylvania and it violates the Constitution of the United States. Now, there's a wrinkle on this because the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has rendered the irrational decision, irrational driven by the fact that it's 5-2 Democrat, and they had to find some way to not let Trump win this case. They decided that present doesn't mean that you have to get to see the ballot. Present means that you only have to be present in the room, which of course is absurd, and laws aren't passed have no meaning. What is the purpose of having somebody in the room while a ballot is counted and you can't see it when you're supposed to be there to assure that the ballot isn't fraudulent? There's no purpose to that. The better interpretation, which was the interpretation of the lower court, and I think anyone who understands English, present means present with the ability to observe so that you can determine if it's a valid ballot or not. And then, of course, it all raises the question, if you do that, if you do exclude Republicans en masse for 682,770 ballots, why are you doing it? Obviously, if the ballots were pristine and there was nothing wrong with them, you'd let the Republicans look, because why have this issue? Why allow this issue to be raised? And when you know Philadelphia, of course, it would be surprising if they weren't cheating. So this was done so that not just the usual cheating could go on, but this could be mass cheating. Mass infusion of absentee ballots to make up for the extraordinary lead that Donald Trump had when the polls closed and the counting stopped on the evening of the 3rd and going into the morning of the 4th. He had an 800,000 lead with 64% of the vote to go, almost impossible to catch up unless you stuffed the ballot box, which is exactly what they did. And now we'll take a short break. if you want a good cigar, go to a good cigar shop. Rudy, R-U-D-Y, 2, in violation of the rules of the cigar shop. Shipped direct to you from famous.com/Rudy. Let's continue the discussion. They're also in Pennsylvania, in violation of the rules of the legislature. People were allowed to cure their ballots. If they put in an early ballot and they left off their name, or they got their address wrong, or they failed to give their address, or they put a wrong name down, they were allowed in the Democrat part of the states to go get it back, but in the Trump parts of the state, they were not. Again, there's no rule in Pennsylvania that allows anyone to cure a ballot. That's made up by an elector who had no right to make it up, is not the constitutional authority to do that, and secondly, did it in a way to discriminate against Republican voters. So there are many other irregularities in Boston, including physical violence used against some of the inspectors, people assisting other people in voting, ballot harvesting. All of it leads to the result that when you deduct the illegal votes from the legal votes, Trump leads by a very, very substantial margin, probably 300,000 votes. And we will be arguing that both in the lawsuit in Pennsylvania and then in the overarching lawsuit that we bring, which will also bring some clarity to this. We will argue that this was a violation of the Constitution because it varied very, very significantly from the rules set for the election, and that it varied to the detriment of one candidate, Donald Trump. So that case has been filed. Those facts have been out. Hard to say that isn't supported by evidence. Affidavits have been supplied. It's just laziness that has people just repeating that as a matter of propaganda. Then we move on to Michigan. Michigan, similar to Pennsylvania, excluded Republicans from viewing the absentee ballots, even though Michigan law required it. Both the absentee and the mail-in ballots. The number not observed is in the hundreds of thousands. It more than overcomes the margin of victory. There was a more dramatic incident in Michigan, which is testified to by 3 witnesses, all in the affidavits, never read by the press, never discussed by the press, in order to give the impression that the case has no evidence. Well, here's the evidence. 3 witnesses at 4:30 in the morning saw 100,000 ballots come in the back door. They came in garbage cans, and they came in cardboard boxes, and they came in shopping bags. They didn't appear to be official ballots. They were put on a table. The lowest number estimated is 60,000. The largest number is 100,000. And they were counted very, very rapidly without even looking at the name on the ballot. And then sometimes they were double, triple, and quadruple counted, meaning they were put in the machine 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And then they were dumped into a pile. And this is very, very similar to activity that occurred in other places at approximately the same time. It was done because a halt had been called to the counting because Trump was getting too far ahead, and the catch-up ballots had to be put in. Of course, once again, this is an election being carried out in violation of state law, in violation of the Constitution, because state law determines the constitutional rules here. The legislature does. Inspection is necessary. And also in Michigan, we have a key witness, a Democratic employee of the city of Detroit for over 30 years, who testifies that she was given over to election duty in September. From the very beginning, she was taught how to cheat. She was told to cheat. She was told not to look at signatures, not to ask for driver's licenses, not to ask for any form of identification, not to inquire about citizenship. When a person wasn't registered, she was told to find someone to register that person to. She was told, in other words, to engage in every manner of cheating you can engage in order to maximize a Democratic vote in that part of the city, even to the extent of her colleagues going over to voting machines for that early voting and showing showing people how to vote Democrat. And for those who only voted for Biden, to try to get them to vote for the rest of the ticket. She herself did that on several occasions. And then, when time came for her to go work on counting the ballots, she corroborates the testimony of many, many others that people were not able to see just about a single ballot, and they were all entered in secret in Michigan. In Wisconsin, there's a similar violation of law. The applications for the mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, many are missing. The law in Wisconsin, again, set by the legislature, very strict. It requires that there be an application for every absentee or mail-in ballot, and if there is none, the vote doesn't count. We are undergoing that inquiry right now, and we'll determine what the number is. We only have to overcome a 10,000 vote margin. I do believe that that's going to happen. And I know the press will be very surprised when it does. In Nevada, similarly, the election was carried out in violation of state laws and regulations because instead of counting by hand and examining signatures by hand, many ballots were put into a machine, the Agilus machine. The machine was set so low, it was set below the specifications of the manufacturer or the specifications of anyone doing any kind of counting. So the machine missed many mismatched signatures. And again, it was in violation of the law of the state. The rest of the state counted by hand, and it inured tremendously to the benefit of the Democrat because it was in that part of the state. We'll be right back. I couldn't believe we were evicted from our home that we didn't even sell. In Deborah's case, titlelock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim and don't know it. Then use code RUDY, that's me, and sign up for 30 free days of protection. That's code RUDY at HomeTitleLock.com. And the agreement, called a consent decree, I believe, or whatever it is, an agreement was made not to match signatures. Of course, there was no authority to do that. The legislature required the matching of signatures. They didn't do it. They didn't do it with regard to hundreds of thousands of signatures. There also were numerous instances of overvotes, numerous instances of people voting 2 and 3 times, numerous instances of people voting other people's names. All of that is part of the lawsuit, but all of it, again, shows that the electors carried out the election in violation of state law, state constitution, which means a violation of the federal constitution. And then finally, Arizona. Arizona has all the same characteristics as the others, again, with a group of witnesses, but each one has several variations of their own. For example, the state of Arizona has an 11,000 vote overcount as of now. That means 11,000 more people voted than were registered. That vote has to be canceled out. The lead, the Biden lead there is only 10,000. And then there have been discovered so far 36,000 people who voted who didn't have citizenship, who, I guess in another way, you could call illegals. And of course, no matter what the Democrats think, citizens can't vote and their votes have to be canceled. So those are the cases that we have so far. Those are the facts that we have so far. So when you hear the statement that these are just wild claims, these are backed by evidence in court right now in 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 cases, Georgia to be filed shortly and Arizona to be filed shortly. And in my next episode, we will talk about how these cases are going to move forward on their own because they have to, because before you can bring a bigger case, these cases have to be allowed to develop so you can do some discovery, which we are presently doing. In the next episode, we'll talk about how they all tie together in something that's very interesting, very fascinating, and is exactly what is needed to bring justice here, to get this vote to exactly the right count, and to determine who won based on honest ballots. think the answer to that you know, but we'll take you through the legal way in which you prove that. We've now laid out the facts. So when the person comes up to you and says there are no facts, tell them this is because they're illiterate and they don't read. And they don't read affidavits that are attached to lawsuits, and they're all right here online. You also can get them at rudyscommonsense.com. That's rudyscommonsense.com. And when you're doing that, you might as well subscribe. It's for free. So we'll be back very soon to take up exactly how this is put together now that we have these 4 files, 6 eventually lawsuits.